be here. I am currently standing in a section in the Mitte Museum in Berlin, and I'm not going to talk a lot here because it seems like a quiet place and I don't want to annoy people, even though there's no one in this particular room. But yeah, I went here. This is the proof. And I'm excited to talk about my findings.
Okay, hello again. So now I'm outside of the Mitte Museum. You can see it behind me here. It was interesting. It seems like not obviously, and not understandably, but colonial history isn't top priority here. Because it's sort of like a local history museum. It's meant to cover all the history of this town. But at the same time, this area, Mitte, it admittedly, like even in its exhibition space, it sort of explicitly states that Mitte was kind of like a central hub for the German Empire. So not only is this local history museum situated in an area that was central to the German Empire, but the museum also includes the district of Wedding as part of the museum's jurisdiction. And that's interesting because that is where the quote-unquote African quarter of Berlin is located. And this quote-unquote African quarter is also the place from which the decolonial walking tours are held, talking about the colonial history of this particular town or this particular district, or at least the references of colonial nostalgia and things which still exist in the African quarter. So there's a lot that you can talk about. There's so much colonial history that's concentrated in this area in particular, So it's a really good opportunity to kind of weave that throughout here. Like, this was a central hub for industry and industrialization, and, colonialism and industrialism, there are a lot of connections there. So it just seems like there's really a lot more that could be done. It doesn't need to be a museum which is wholly focused on colonialism or decolonization or anything like that. But I think it sort of deserves to be woven into the narrative a little bit more than it is. I say a little bit as an understatement. I feel like it really needs a lot more weaving in. At the moment, we've got maybe one or two threads, but we need like a whole ball of yarn of colonialism to form part of this tapestry of history in this area. I will say though, like, there are some really awesome decisions that were made in the interpretation of the place. Like, there's one section where the town is on the roof, right? I don't really know why. A lot of the text is in German, so maybe it explains why. I'll have to have a look back at my photographs. But it's cool, it looks cool. The exhibition spaces are very clear and sort of lend themselves to not necessarily having like a linear sort of progression. I think there's a lot of potential for this space to be used in a lot of in creative ways. And I think that to some extent they have employed that, which is really good. The colors of the rooms indicate different themes, I suppose, that the museum is talking about. And I think that's really cool. And in that sense, yeah, you could weave colonialism into any one of those spaces in a casual way. And I think it would be a huge improvement in terms of getting a more holistic understanding of how this district was built and what its role has been in Berlin history. I don't see any kind of like movement towards becoming more decolonial in its approach, But I think that if it did decide to do that, I think it's got a really good space to be able to move ahead with these kinds of approaches, because the building itself is structured in a way that really lends itself to these kinds of, plural narratives and discourses and things like that. So, it does seem like it's early days yet. I don't really see any evidence of decolonial approaches in this museum, which is not to say that it's not in the process of thinking about how to approach these things. But yeah, I think I'm going to follow this museum and learn a bit more about the museum's history, where it came from, how it developed, and what are the priorities moving forward of this museum with regards to its representational strategies. So I guess we'll see.